and we're live streamed as well.
Did anyone hear Tommy Sexton on Radioactive Magazine Tuesday?
I did.
Good.
And Mary
had an up close and personal hearing of it.
That's right. I certainly did hear it.
Yeah, weren't you interviewed as well?
Yeah, I was, yes. Yeah. And I was the one who then got somebody from the Kansas side to do their version, and Tommy, because I knew she, yeah.
Hey, in the future, if you are going to be on something like that, I'd love to know, and so I can put it in the newsletter.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. I didn't think of it in time, but thanks.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. Somebody's playing some lively music. All right, well, it's 10 o'clock. I'm sure we'll have some other people jumping on, but I would like to go ahead and get started. First thing I'd like to do is welcome any new members that we have with us. I don't see any unfamiliar faces except for the gentleman who's having trouble connecting to audio. But Laura, you said we have one new member this week, right?
Yes, but we don't have any, I don't see any of our new members on right now.
All right, so we get to skip that part, unfortunately. Maybe they'll come on later. And then again, there's a link in the chat. I'll put it in again for that second Zoom. So for the podcast, Rachel and I will be meeting with members afterwards. If you want to come to that Zoom and talk to us, it'll just take a few minutes. We won't be more than a half hour total. We're just going to ask a little bit about why you're in the league and how long you've been in the league and that kind of thing for the podcast. So only if you want to be on the podcast, join us. All right, it is my pleasure to introduce Steve Sitton. He's the site administrator at the Thomas Hart Benton Home and Historic Site. Did I get that right?
Not quite. Thomas Hart Benton Home and Studio State Historic Site.
Oh, I was close. I was close.
Very close.
Yeah. All right. It was close. And he's been there for, I don't know, 20 some years and knows everything there is to know about Benton's life and house for sure. So he's here to talk to us about Benton and his Year of Peril. So if everyone would please mute. If you forget to mute, I will mute you. Don't have your feelings hurt by that. You will, of course, be invited to unmute when it's all over so we can ask questions and clap and such. And then I'm going to spotlight you, Steve, and let you share screen. And all right. So, ladies and gentlemen, Steve Sitton.
So give me a thumbs up or let me know you can see the State Parks logo. All right.
Yep.
So I do work for Missouri State Parks, as Ann said, at the Thomas Hart Benton Home State Historic Site. We're located right here in Midtown, Kansas City at 3616 Bellevue. So pretty close to the KU Med Center and the Uptown Theater and Penn Valley College. We're not doing tours at the moment, still closed down for COVID, but we are actually the smallest Missouri State Park. We have 1/3 of an acre here. And I'm going to kind of assume that everybody's a little bit familiar with Thomas Hart Benton and his artwork. So I'm not going to go through, a whole lot of his life and his background and his style. But what I want to particularly talk about today is a series of paintings that he did immediately after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor that are collectively known as the Year of Peril. It is a series of paintings that are not very well known. As you can see here, they're a little scary. So what I want to talk about this morning is his political upbringing, his military experience, and then we'll go through these paintings individually and talk about the reaction to them. I've got some discussion questions that we can talk about at the end, I think that'll probably work out best. But here's just a little bit of his, like I said, his political background. For whatever it's worth, Thomas Hart Benton is probably the most famous painter from Missouri. He's born in the small town of Neosho, which is in the extreme southwest corner of the state, 15 miles south of Joplin, born April 15th, 1889. And one of the reasons we chose this program for today is it's December 11th, and Pearl Harbor Day was just a few days ago on the 7th. So that's why we're doing the Year of Peril program. But Tom Benton does come from a political family. In his wonderful autobiography called An Artist in America, right on page 5, he says, politics was the core of our family life. And it begins with this gentleman, Thomas Hart Benton, the senator. That is the painter's great uncle. Sometimes you'll hear great uncle, sometimes grandfather. Great uncle is actually correct. And here is a quote where Senator Benton refers to himself in the third person. Benton and the people, Benton and democracy are one and the same, sir, synonymous terms. So again, he's born into this, the painter is born, or the future painter, born into this political family, well-to-do family, highly regarded family, and well-connected as well. So a little bit of background on the senator. He was one of Missouri's first two and longest serving U.S. senator from 1821 to 1851. He was big into the westward expansion, manifest destiny, the expansion of the railroads, early homesteading efforts. He was opposed to paper currency, felt we should just have gold and silver coinage, thus his nickname, Old Bullion. He was a Southerner, born in North Carolina. He was a slave owner, although we do know that he freed at least one of his slaves during his third term in Congress. But he was opposed to the expansion of slavery into the new territories, Kansas, Nebraska, Oregon, California. That is essentially why he lost his Senate seat in 1851. So he was what at the time would have been considered a moderate. He was not for abolition. He was not for the expansion of slavery. So a moderate in the 1840s, 1850s. He did write a 200-page opposition paper to the Supreme Court's decision in the Dred Scott case, where it was determined, the Supreme Court, one of their most infamous rulings, that Dred Scott, as a former slave, did not actually even have the right to bring a suit for his freedom. He did fight a duel with future President Andrew Jackson. Later on, they became pretty strong allies. Senator Benton can be considered the number 2 Democrat of the period behind Andrew Jackson. And most importantly for today, Senator Benton was a populist. He represented farmers, small town merchants, laborers, the working class, but again, more rural as opposed to industrial. So those are the folks that he supported and in turn supported him. So a populist. This is the future painter, his father, Colonel Macenius Eason Benton. He was a well-known lawyer in Neosho, Missouri. He was a U.S. District Attorney. And when Tom was 7, his father was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives for 4 terms, 8 years. And Tom, again, in his autobiography, writes, Dad was always campaigning over Southwest Missouri, either for himself or some other Democrat. This activity was the breath of his life. Almost as soon as I could walk, my father began taking me on his political tours. So again, he comes from a political background. He is supposed to grow up to be a lawyer, to be a politician. But his father, being in Congress and a highly regarded Democrat there in the Ozarks, was fairly well-to-do. This is the house that Tommy grew up in Neosho. But he also says our dinner table was always surrounded with arguing expiatory men who drank heavily, ate heartily, and talked long over fat cigars, the ends of which they chewed. And he talks about Champ Clark and Williams Jennings Bryan actually were there at his boyhood home for breakfast. So I know the League, you guys are fairly politically active, obviously, and aware, but let me briefly talk about Champ Clark and Williams Jennings Bryan. So Champ Clark was a U.S. representative for 21 years, if my math is right. I don't think it is. Nope. That's why I got a history degree, so I don't have to do math. He was Speaker of the House for 8 years. He did run for president in 1912, but lost the nomination to Woodrow Wilson. Williams Jennings Bryan, even better known, he was called the Great Commoner. That goes back to that populism sort of idea. Most well known for the Scopes Monkey trial in Dayton, Tennessee, and his Cross of Gold speech. He ran for president 3 times, obviously never won, and was Woodrow Wilson's Secretary of State. So again, these are men that Tom Benton met as a child in his father's home. During the First World War, Benton had decided to become an artist already. He had studied in Chicago, studied in Paris. He was living in New York, but First World War breaks out. Tom joins the Navy. He didn't see any action. He didn't go overseas. He was a draftsman. He had to do reports of the camouflage of the naval ships. And up to this point, he had kind of been a modern impressionist painter, but this forces him more into representational, a realism sort of style that will then become more familiar to all of you. So this is a mural, or a portion of a mural, that a lot of you have probably seen down in the Missouri State Capitol. Tom painted this in 1935-36, called A Social History of the State of Missouri. Here is a scene of a political stump speech. That is his father, Colonel Benton, giving a speech with a poster of Champ Clark behind him. So again, Tom Benton has this political background even in his artwork. Also in that same mural, there is a scene that shows Kansas City. You can see there in the background the Nelson Art Gallery, the Liberty Memorial, and he has a businessman's luncheon there in the foreground with this gentleman who I'm sure most of you can figure out is Tom Pendergast. So again, local politics, local business that Tom Benton is painting. And then I just threw this slide in for you all, since we're talking to the league. This is a sketch that Tom did in 1955 titled Ghost Town, and he wrote on there, "Birthplace of women's suffrage. Act giving women the right to vote and hold office was passed in territorial legislature December 10th, 1869. Esther Hobart Morris led the crusade from South Pass City, Wyoming." So Tom apparently in 1955 visited South Pass City. It was a ghost town, but he did recognize it as this place where women's suffrage was beginning. And also later on, to the owner of the drawing, Tom wrote a letter. "Wyoming was the first U.S. state to grant women's suffrage. The town depicted in your drawing, now a ghost town, is supposed to be the first place where the proposal for equal voting rights for women was accepted. Anyhow, the first territorial legislature granted women full suffrage." I forget the name of the town. Now he's writing this in 1973, but it was near the famed South Pass of the Oregon Trail. Whether Tom is correct in his history here, I'll leave up to you, although I think he is right that women was the first great state to grant suffrage. So here is what is a very typical Benton painting. He is termed a regionalist artist. This is Cradling Wheat from 1938. This painting is in the St. Louis Art Museum. But essentially his artwork is a result of his parents and his father and his great uncle's regionalist or populist painting, or populist politics. There we go. I was trying to get something out of the way. I couldn't read what I had written. So if up to this point you were like, I'm not sure who Tom Benton is, you see this one, you probably go, oh, that guy. I've seen his artwork before. But as the Depression wears on, Tom had become a New Deal Democrat. He really supported FDR. He really hoped that the New Deal would reform American economy and American society. But he felt actually that the New Deal was not going far enough. And so, as many Americans did, he became disillusioned. And he has this painting that he titled Plowing that he did in 1929. And then in 1934, he changed the title to Plowing It Under. One of the New Deal programs, simple economic supply and demand, to raise the cost of farm goods so that farmers could get paid more. Farmers were actually being paid by the government to destroy crops. So here is a farmer plowing under his field. So less supply, higher demand, higher farm prices for these farmers. Obviously, a very controversial policy, didn't entirely work because then the consumers have to pay more. But Tom did recognize the controversy by changing the name of this painting. And then one of the most famous books from the Depression, The Dust Bowl, Grapes of Wrath. In 1940, Tom illustrated an edition of Grapes of Wrath and did depict the departure of the Jodes as they were packing up to leave Oklahoma. Also from 1940, he does this painting, After Many Springs. In the top, in the background, you can see that typical Benton, the farmer, the plow, the mule. But notice there in the foreground, the skull and the revolver. A lot of the farmers did not survive the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl, and took this way out. Suicide rates went up 30% nationwide between 1928 and 1932. So Benton, again, I think in this otherwise typical painting is again referencing that. So it's 1940, it's 1941. War is going on in China, in North Africa, in Europe, obviously. America is very concerned about this. Should we get involved? Should we stay out? And so Tom writes, by the late autumn of 1941, my mind was so much on the international situation, I found it difficult to concentrate on painting. In late November of 41, to compensate for this impotence, I took on an extensive speaking tour. Though I might be empty of painting ideas, I could still talk. I was on the stand in Cincinnati when the Japanese struck Pearl Harbor. I got off promptly, telegraphed my agency to cancel all further engagements, and went home. I had an idea. I would try to wake up the Middle West to the grimness of our national situation. So the result of his idea to wake up the Middle West are these paintings. He did these 8 large paintings in 9 weeks. It's an incredible output. Whether you like the paintings or not, it is really a testament to his stamina, I guess. So that is the Year of Peril. At the same time, there also was a pamphlet published about this, and we're going to go through each of these paintings individually, and I'll tell you or show you what Tom Benton wrote about each of these paintings, how he described them. So the first one is Indifference. Because some of the inertia of a widely pervasive national sloth and some of the deadening effects of a widespread national habit of ignoring the unprecedented had crept even into the minds of those who had the technical defense of America in their hands, young men died and machines were needlessly destroyed before we even knew that war was upon us. So again, this is pretty much direct. He's painting Pearl Harbor here with the crashed planes and the dead bodies. Notice there in the foreground, there's even a disembodied head. These are not pretty paintings. I probably should have given a little bit of a warning beforehand that there are going to be some disturbing images here. I apologize for not doing that. But they're scary paintings. This one is titled The Sowers. Are we to stand by and let them reap? Tom asked. These sowers of death, bloated with their gorge of human blood, are right now marching over the curve of the earth straight towards us, leaving fires of destruction in every furrow of the lands they traverse. They will not be halted by our refusing to see them, nor will they be softened by cajoleries of appeasement. They want what we have, and with their brigands, they will take it unless we can again find some of the iron that was in the souls of our fathers. So you have this caricature German figure there, Nazi figure with the cap, and instead of throwing out seeds, he's throwing out skulls. Tom knows art history. He studied in Paris. His painting, The Sowers, is a almost direct, not satire or parody, but again, reflection of these two very famous 1800s paintings by Jean-Francois Millet and Vincent van Gogh, also titled The Sowers. So Tom took the same exact subject and transformed it to World War II. Third painting, The Harvest. Farmers of America, who yet left comfortably over your quiet fields, you are going to be called upon this year to work harder than you ever have worked in your lives. Without your help, the soldiers and sailors who battle for the safety of your land cannot maintain their strength. If they fail in their strength, your strength will be of no avail when the planes of the enemy come over the hills and down the valleys of America to reap your fields with fire. So Tom's really trying to say, it's not just the soldiers that are going to be fighting this war, it is all of America. And the farmers, you're going to have to do your part as well. And if you don't, this is what's going to happen. Again, very disturbing, very tragic images that Tom is conveying here. Starry Night, the stars that look down on the seas of the world in this year of peril see men die grotesque and horrible deaths in order that their brothers may hope to live in freedom. Again, a Pearl Harbor reference specifically there. And then Casualty. If comfort is derived from reports that casualties in some remote action were few, be reminded of the real meaning of the word. It means that living men's bodies have been pierced and torn apart, and probably also that valuable instruments of war have been destroyed with them. Otherwise, the enemy will come upon us and make us know at our very firesides the real and shattering human meaning of the word casualty. And we tend to do this too, a couple people died here, but it didn't happen. It wasn't anybody I know, so we can downplay it. And Tom's saying, nope, if we're not careful, you're going to know the meaning of the word casualty as well. Invasion comes when people are too weak to fight, or when having strength, they quarrel and bicker among themselves until they apply the power to, I can't read the bottom of that. Sorry, it's blocked. It's covered by, how do I get that out of the way? To apply their strength, thank you. So this painting I want to talk about for just a second. If you look in the background, you see that generic coastal city, whether it's Boston, New York, Savannah, San Diego, LA, Seattle, doesn't matter. But a lot of people thought that's where the war is going to be fought, is in these coastal cities. But Tom is showing, again, those coastal cities have been overrun, and it's the heartland that is now being raped and pillaged. Again, a dead child there, the farmer being bayoneted in the mouth, the woman being assaulted. Horrific, horrific paintings. These paintings clearly cause a reaction, and that is what Tom was after. I think these paintings are a little bit of a glimpse into the hysteria that America was facing in 1942. We've been attacked. What happened? What's going to be the result? Come on. This painting is a little different. Again, Jesus Christ has stood through the centuries as the preeminent symbol of the brotherhood of man. Over and over again, evil people mad with dreams of power have driven the centurion spear into his side. And once again today, just as man with his worldwide exchange of goods and with his new devices of communication has approached a realizable economic brotherhood, the old assault is loosed. Mastery, not brotherhood. Control, not share, are the slogans of the new attackers. So you have Christ on the cross there with, again, these caricatures in the blue, the Italian soldier, the Japanese ogre, and the German soldier driving the spear into Christ's side, with a plane with the iron crosses on the wings, again, shooting the Christ figure up on his cross. And then this is the largest of the 8 paintings, Exterminate. This painting in and of itself is 8 foot by 6 foot. The others are 4 by 5, 2 by 3, but this is the biggest one, Exterminate. Evil and predatory forces are always with us, Benton reminds us, in all places at all times. Now and then these forces cunningly joining small powers until they have attained great power. Germany by itself, Italy by itself, Japan by itself were not world powers, but they have now formed an axis and they threaten to enslave the world, Benton continues. Humanity must then rise up and tear their evil out of them and kill them. For this task, sensual hate, ferocity, and brute will are necessary. Humanity must deny itself to save itself. Tom is arguing that this is not going to be a nice war. This is not going to be a chivalrous war. We have to fight just as nasty and just as hard as they do, as these evil forces do. Otherwise, we will lose, and otherwise, he writes at the bottom, they will devour America's substance. But at least in this painting, you have the Americans fighting back. So that, again, very xenophobic, very caricature Japanese ogre figure is being stabbed, bayoneted. His chains of enslavement are being ripped out of his abdomen. You have that Hitler-looking figure with his whip of fire. You still have some dead Americans there, but notice also in the background, you have the factory producing the tanks, producing the planes. So America is at this point fighting back. So those are the 8 paintings that are collectively known as Year of Peril. And Tom's plan was to hang these paintings in Union Station in Kansas City, very busy train station right here in the center of the country, where travelers would see them and be shocked. But Benton's agent, come on, Reeves Lowenthal there in the center.
So I got here, ready to go, and then everybody waits around for 20 minutes. Finally, somebody texts me and says, the meeting was supposed to start 7 minutes ago.
Sorry. There we go. Sorry about that.
No worries. So there in the center, you see Benton's agent, Reeves Lowenthal. He had an organization, Associated American Artists, a gallery. He saw these paintings and he said, Tom, this is no local affair. It's a national one. Forget Union Station. Leave these pictures to me and I'll put them over the whole country. So Reeves Lowenthal took these Year of Peril paintings and he was able to sell them to Abbott Laboratories in Chicago for $20,000. In 1942, quite a bit of money. Abbott Laboratories, they still exist. Back then, they were most known for making pharmaceuticals for the Army. So they purchased these paintings. I mentioned that pamphlet earlier. About 160,000 of those were published. You can see the cover of it. About 28 million images showed up in newspapers and magazines. They did 326,000 posters. Reeves had a showing at his gallery in New York that drew about 75,000 people. And those old newsreels, Paramount Pictures used to do, they actually used Year of Peril in that. And let's see if this works.
A great American artist, Thomas Hart Benton, portrays World War #2. He explains his war paintings with,
I made these paintings because of a conviction obtained by traveling around the country to lecture during the weeks following Pearl Harbor. I saw that too many people are overconfident, over-optimistic, and under the impression that their life could go on much as usual while George won the war.
New York Gallery's first Benton series called The Year of Peril. This is Exterminate, a plea that America outmatched the destructive will of the Axis. This is called Again. Benton says it portrays the recurrence of evil peoples mad with power. The Sowers, and Benton asked, are we to stand by and let them reap? Starry Night, the seas of the world with freedom in its gravest peril.
So, and I'll ask you all this at the end, what your reaction is to Year of Peril, but let's talk about what the critics and the media reacted to them. And these paintings, the gallery opening was in April, so that's where these reviews begin to come out. So Wide World Features said that Benton applies his talents of powerful depiction and almost brutal clarity to waking America to its problems in this year of war. The Portland, Oregon Journal said they were beautiful in composition, magnificent in color and draftsmanship. Art Digest, though, the art world, they produced little excitement. They created less furor than it was expected. The Chicago Times said the bad boy of American art has gone to war with his palette. And the Indianapolis Star newspaper, monstrous as to size and monstrous as to subject, that are so unusual and so up to the minute in their timeliness that the illustrated news magazines have been fairly falling over each other in an effort to get the first story and back it up with full page reproductions in color. You go back to newspapers in 1942 and you will see Year of Peril. And yeah, they are full page, they are color. These paintings really did show up. People saw them. Again, hundreds of thousands of posters and pamphlets and in the newspapers. But as time goes on, not so favorably received. Propaganda outposts in Iceland and the Congo declared invasion, which you see there at the top, entirely unsuitable and too brutal. The US State Department in August said that the grotesque nature of, again, might offend Christians, and the posters are unsuitable for territories populated by non-Christians. The New Republic just simply said they were Benton's bad paintings. And boy, you want to cut an artist off at the knees, compare him to Donald Duck, the silliest scene in Donald Duck's mix-ups with jam and flypaper. Art News from May 1st, 1942. So the paintings made a brief, big splash and then pretty quickly disappeared. In the fall of 1944, Abbott Laboratories donated the Year of Peril to the State Historical Society in Columbia, Missouri. So they paid $20,000 for them in 42, and then 2 years later gave them to the State Historical Society, where you can see them today. They usually don't have all of them out. Here is their old gallery on the campus of University of Missouri. But again, there in the background, you can see the size of some of these paintings. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about Year of Peril as propaganda. And I'm going to contend that propaganda posters usually have one of two aims, either to build up your own people and the maintenance of their morale. So you have this very noble, handsome flyboy there protecting America over the ramparts we watch. Or you have, the other aim is to demoralize the enemy and erode his alliances. So it's a long, long way to Rome. It's an Italian poster. You see a snail holding a British and an American flag creeping up the Italian peninsula. And the idea is, look, America, look, Britain, you're making such slow progress. You're never going to get to Rome. You should just give up. Why are you still fighting? So if these are one of the two aims of wartime propaganda, do we consider Benton's Year of Peril a success or failure? So think about that, keep in mind, and we'll come back to that at the end. I also have this as a question. So Rita Benton, that's Tom Benton's wife. What did she think of Year of Peril? Rita Benton was born in Italy. She was very strong Roman Catholic, and yet her husband paints these prejudicial, xenophobic, caricatured paintings. How could Tom paint such images while married to an Italian Catholic woman? Certainly something that could be seen as quite offensive. So I don't have a great answer on this, but Rita did do an interview to the New York World Telegram in April 15th, 1942, and she simply said, "Tom's impatient to get back home to paint my flowers. That will be a change after all this." I also talked to one of their family friends, John Callison. He told me that Rita loved all the paintings Tom did, but she thought these were grotesque, just like everyone else. But I don't think Benton's considering his wife's feelings or really whatever anybody else is. I think these Year of Peril paintings are almost a glimpse into Tom Benton's nightmares and by extension, America's nightmare. Further into 1942, Tom continues to do war paintings. These are not part of Year of Peril, but I certainly wanted to talk about this. Here's a large painting titled Prelude to Death. And Tom writes, "If this war is lost, what we know as America is lost, democracy is lost." So you have these soldiers being loaded onto the troop ship. In particular, you have this figure in the center with the light on him looking back. And Tom writes, "This work was never used as a poster because of its gloominess and because its chief central figure was shown looking homeward rather than forward to his duty. But it was real. All the boys looked back as they were marched up the gangplanks and into the holds of the gray ships, which were to take them away into the unknown." And Tom Benton never shied away from painting reality. And I think that's a very common reaction for a young man that's sailing off the war to look back homeward. I also found it rather interesting in this very famous film, All Quiet on the Western Front. This is the final scene where, again, these soldiers are marching off into the battlefield with all these as a graveyard, and every single one of them looks back at the camera. So I think Benton was aware of this and used the same idea in Prelude to Death, which he later changed the name of that to soften it up to just Embarkation. This is a painting I want to spend a little bit of time on, also from 1942, Negro Soldier. This is an interesting painting. It is a painting that causes some controversy, causes a lot of discussion, and there are quite a few different ways you can view this painting. So I'll kind of give you my take on it, but let you talk about it a little bit too later on. This soldier, and during World War II, the units, the outfits were segregated. And it would have been very, very easy for Tom to paint a white soldier. But he chose to depict an African-American soldier. These men were fighting for democracy, for freedom in the South Pacific, in Europe, in North Africa, fighting for democracy and freedom. And yet they didn't necessarily usually have those freedoms back home. Some people see this figure as very brutish, even very simian. For me, he looks very determined. He is striding forward to his duty. He knows there's danger ahead, but he is marching on to meet it. So take that as you will. Again, some people see this painting as incredibly racist. I think that's valid, but again, I think it is important to note that Benton went ahead and chose to not just paint a white soldier. That would have been the easy way out. He did choose to paint a black man fighting for America, and it wasn't until after World War II, President Truman then began to segregate or desegregate, excuse me, the armed forces, and yet Tom paints it a segregated unit. So again, we can come back and talk about that later. And Tom also writes in a completely different article, but still the same time period, when this war is over, a new and better America whipped into shape by sacrifice and hardened by a rebirth of male will is going to rise. If this does not occur, there will be no America. He does just say male will here. Tom could be, often was quite chauvinistic. He portrayed himself as this manly man. That is one of his certainly lesser admirable qualities. That was a bad way to put that. Yeah, Tom was chauvinistic, and he isn't depicting women in any of these paintings other than being assaulted, but it is the time period as well. So let's go back a little bit to Tom's military service. During World War I, he signed up for the draft, but he did say that he was exempt from the draft due to physical disability, anti-nationalism, and anti-militarism. He didn't want to get shot at, so he thought it would be safer to join the Navy. And like I said, he didn't see any action. He was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia. But this is his draft card for World War I. I want to point out something really interesting on this. Down in the very bottom corner of the draft card, it is typed, "If person is of African descent, tear off this corner." That way the draft board could very easily separate black enrollees, black draftees from white and put them into those segregated units. So this is on a government document for World War I. During World War II, Tom Benton is too old to serve, but there was something called the Old Man's Registration. And this is his card for that. It was to collect information on the industrial capacity and skills of men aged 45 to 64. I found this card at the National Archives in down there by Union Station. But as World War II goes on, and we talked about Tom Benton's Year of Peril as propaganda, now he begins to do some paintings that are more traditional propaganda. This is one called Back Him Up. So again, you have the soldier running forward, but you have the farmer and the factory workers behind, backing him up, pushing him forward, supporting his cause. Then in the summer of 1943, the Navy called up Tom Benton and hired him and another artist, Georges, that is how it's spelled, Georges Schreiber, to go on the shakedown cruise with a brand new submarine, the USS Dorado. So here they are on the deck. They're in Long Island Sound. They came out of Hartford, Connecticut, I believe. And they were on this submarine for several weeks. and did a whole series of paintings and drawings. This is Tom's painting Score Another for the subs. So they're test firing the guns at a target ship, getting their aim down, they're learning how to operate this submarine and operate the guns. Submarine's obviously very crowded. Here are some of the sailors' bunks mixed in right among the torpedoes. Tom got to know these sailors. I think there were 60 of them on board the USS Dorado in these very cramped quarters. Then the Dorado dropped Benton and Schreiber off back on shore, and it headed down towards the canal zone to go out and fight in the Pacific. In the Caribbean, the USS Dorado was lost with all hands. The wreck of the Dorado has actually never been located. We're not exactly sure what happened to it, but the best guess is that it was attacked by an American bomber. There was a German submarine operating in the area, and this American bomber attacked the USS Dorado by mistake and sunk it. Seemed to be the, the best theory. And Tom took this pretty hard because, again, he got to know these guys pretty well. Then in 1944, the Navy calls him again and sends Tom to Pittsburgh, where they were building a LST, a landing ship tank. So you can see the mouth of this ship will open up on the beach, and the tanks can drive out for the invasion. So he did a whole series of paintings and drawings again of the construction of LST 768 in Pittsburgh. Here is it being launched. Tom got on LST 768, rode with it down the Ohio and the Mississippi rivers down to New Orleans, watched them practice their beaching maneuvers, went to some of the New Orleans bars with some of the sailors, realized that at 55 years old, he wasn't quite as young as he thought he was and couldn't quite keep up with these guys. LST 768 went on to fight successfully in the battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. So we're just about done here, but I found, Tom paints these in the winter of 1942, January, February, March of 1942. So here is one of those Year of Peril paintings, Harvest. At the exact same time, Edward Hopper was doing the painting you see on the left, Nighthawks, a classic, one of the most iconic American paintings. And I just thought it was very interesting to compare and contrast the mood that each artist is trying to reflect and which painting more accurately conveys life and attitudes in America in January 1942. I just thought this was really a interesting idea that these two paintings were done by famous American artists at the exact same time, and they are completely different. In Nighthawks, other than the isolationism, you would not know that there's probably a war going on at all. And in the Harvest, you would not know that the whole world is not being destroyed. So again, we can come back and talk about that in a few minutes. So here's Tom Benton. That's what he looks like at about this time period, sitting in his studio. And he says, democracy is an evolutionary process, slow, full of compromises and the uncertainties that go with trial and error. The human freedom for which democracy exists, could not be maintained by any such process. So I'm going to turn off my screen. If I can figure out how to do that. If you want to throw something in the chat, if you want to raise your hand, unmute yourself, we can take questions, take some discussion. But I'll start it off with, jump in with what do you think about Year of Peril? What is your reaction to that?
And give me 1 sec to take you off spotlight too, so
okay.
That, there we go, so that everybody can see things the way that they want. Okay, yeah, please feel free to unmute yourself. And I'm sorry, Steve, can you ask that question again?
Oh, sure. So what are people's reaction to these paintings? Do you like them? Do you not like them? What do you think about the xenophobia, the caricature that he conveys in those? The Nighthawks versus the Harvest painting, any of those sorts of topics, whatever, Year of Peril or Benton related you guys want to discuss. I think these are paintings that create a reaction.
Sandy, you had your hand up?
Well,
go ahead.
I have a hard time avoiding the words because to eerily translate to today?
Yeah.
I'm glad somebody brought that up, and I
That's a-
usually don't. I let you guys get there. But think back to September 12th, 2001. That hysteria, that fear, that overreaction, and again, that what happened? We didn't expect this. What's coming next? So, yep.
That it was
Say,
a-
I'm thinking back to January 6th,
That too, yes.
2020.
Yes.
Yeah,
And especially Benton's last quote, that democracy is an evolutionary process.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the notion that we could be fighting amongst ourselves
Yep.
and make ourselves more vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the biggest point he made in writing.
Well, and the small forces joining together, I think that's certainly happening now here within our own borders.
I might argue that Nighthawks at the Diner is the more realistic portrayal of those two, of what was going on in America.
I could be, because America was still, in a lot of ways, very isolationist at that point. And yeah, and the other thing too, I want to point out with Year of Peril, again, they're scary paintings, which was Tom's. That was his goal, was to scare people, to wake Middle America up.
Mhm.
They're a little surrealistic, but if you think back to your history too, early 1942, America was losing the war. We had been, badly damaged at Pearl Harbor. The first several battles in the South Pacific, America lost as well. So there was a lot of fear that America was done for. And certainly, Germany was clearly doing, they were winning most of their battles in Europe. Britain was holding out, but that was about it.
So
Nice comment there, Sandy. Up late, couldn't sleep drinking.
yeah, about Nighthawks. So prior to the series of paintings, did Benton get criticism for his politics?
He did. And in the 1920s, Benton had been living in New York City in Greenwich Village. He flirted with Marxism, because what artist there didn't? He broke with the Marxists because they really wanted the artist to use the artwork to preach the message. You had to show the workers being downtrodden. And Benton really didn't do that very much. But then he also wasn't painting American heroes, George Washington and Abe Lincoln, so much. He was painting the working class. So he almost kind of couldn't win. But then he does become a New Deal Democrat. He becomes a progressive. He supported the candidacy of Henry Wallace in 1948. And there was even some talk of Benton running for Senate and using the famous Benton name to trade on that. And Rita said that no, he was too busy. And she also said that anybody can be a senator, but nobody can paint like my Tom.
Well, and for me, in watching it, I just, when clearly he was moved to stop talking and start drawing again because of the war and what was happening, I was just thinking, how would he do it now with the peril the United States is in? At least in my view, we are truly in peril of losing our country in the most insidious of ways. And how would he draw that now? Because it's not, it isn't ones that is given to dramatic, scenes like his from that Year of Peril were. So I don't know, but we really need it as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I don't have a good answer for that. Sometimes Benton was thought of as too communist, too left-leaning, because he's painting working class. But then sometimes he's thought of as almost too fascist, because he was very nationalistic. And he did say, I'm an American, I have to paint American scenes. I can't paint like the French and they can't paint like me. So he did have some of those kind of early ideas of America first. And this whole regionalism idea was, let's paint the strength the heart of Middle America. So how that translates to today, I'm not sure. And Benton, as you can kind of see in these paintings too, was a complicated guy. I mean, most of us are. So I think it's very difficult to, take somebody from, 70 years ago and what would they think of today? You don't always know. But it is an interesting question and something I've certainly kept myself up at night thinking about.
That's probably what I thought most watching this was, where are the artists today? I mean, I think maybe music does what he was doing, but I don't see visual artists doing the same thing, but maybe I'm missing it.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Lisa, because Benton was nationally famous. He was on the cover of Time magazine in 1934. Yeah. He was in Life magazine several times. So he was almost this rock star painter, and the everyday people knew about him. And there are very few visual artists that, at least American artists, that are nationally known.
Right.
And I think in some ways that role has been taken over by musicians and movie stars and television personalities and not so much the visual artist.
Can I interrupt with that, please?
Sure.
I'm a volunteer docent at the Nerman Museum of Contemporary Art out at Johnson County Community College. And if you want to see art, the political side of art that you don't think is there anymore, contact me and come out there. Oh my God. And who's not nationally known? Let's go with Kerry James Marshall for one. Gahinde Wiley. Kerry James Marshall, all of his paintings are very political with respect to how he portrays African Americans. So we've got it going very strong today with contemporary artists. It's not just what you might hear in music.
Oh, I would love to. Thank you for pointing that out.
Right. Yeah, thank you for telling us about that.
And also, Sandy made a really good comment about cartoonists. Cartoonists are the ones making the commentary on the state of our country today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, political cartoonists, yes. I guess I was just trying to think of somebody, an artist that would be nationally, and maybe I mean, you guys can speak to this more than me. Maybe he was not known as, I mean, I guess I just know because we live in Kansas City, I know his work so well. And I just don't know of a visual artist. I mean, I know I will go out there. That's amazing, but I don't know of a visual artist that made such a huge impact with the whole country. But maybe there is, and I'm just not following it. But I will go out there. That's absolutely amazing that I can go out there and see that.
And I will tell you, they're installing some new lighting over the Christmas holidays. So a lot of the museum building itself will be closed, but the art is all through the entire campus. There's tons of contemporary Native American art, Latino art. We've got the Charlotte Street Foundation Award winners out there right now. Mind blowing. And political for those of you for everybody that wants that.
So did Benton paint any scenes of violence in his work prior to the Year of Peril series?
A little bit, yes. Yes, he did. Starting about 1919, so right after World War I, he did a series of paintings that are called American Historical Epic, and he wanted to paint the history of the United States from the first European settlement all the way up until the 1920s. And one of the main themes of that series, he did about 18 panels, some of it you can see at the Nelson Art Gallery, is competition, and especially economic competition. And there are scenes definitely of violence between and aggression. In fact, that's one of the titles of one of the panels, aggression between the colonists and the Native Americans. But again, he looks at it more from an economic, how the different struggle for resources created conflict. He did do one of the Battle of Little Bighorn off the top of my head, things like that. So yeah, he did, but these certainly are much more, the Year of Peril is much more in your face than anything else he ever did. Because even that one I showed after Many Springs, where the skull and the rusted revolver, but it was just a very small portion of the overall painting. So he hints at it more, but this one here, yeah, it's just right there.
Steve, didn't he also in the murals that he did for the Missouri Capitol, there's one of him being lynched, of a Black person being lynched in that, I think.
There is. It's a very, very small figure. He does also show Jesse James in there.
Right.
He shows scenes of slavery. He also did a mural for the state of Indiana that has a bigger lynching scene as well.
He shows the Klan in there, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
So I mean, it's not focused on these things aren't huge, but they're still very much part of the story, I think.
They are. And Tom's core belief was common art for the common man. So he wasn't, and in his mural in the Missouri State Capitol, it's not a military history of the state. It's not a political history of the state, even though he does have that political scene of his father. It's a social history. And overall, the theme of a lot of his paintings is the action, very important, the action of the everyday people on the development of the land. And yeah, sometimes that did include violence.
There was a show at the Nelson several years ago depicting much of Benton's work. And these paintings were in a sort of a separate room, specifically so that people who didn't want to be exposed to them didn't have to be, because they are still 70 years later, almost 80 years later, shocking to see in what they depict. And they're clearly intended as propaganda. There's no apology for that. And so the depictions of the Asian peril and the German are, I think, taken in that context. Nobody was real happy about Germany or Japan in 1942.
Yeah, and that was Tom's goal, was to shock. And I again apologize. I should have at the very beginning given a little warning, like there's going to be some disturbing stuff in here. And but that was Tom's goal. And again, I think it's a glimpse into his hysteria. And even just the fact that he did all 8 of those paintings in 9 weeks.
Amazing.
I mean, he must have been working all night long, and just the paintings just must have poured out of him. And that fear that he was just pouring onto the canvas.
Can you give us some context? How long would he generally take to create a painting, say the size of that large one that was in the gallery?
So that large one, he did over his career, which spanned about 70 years altogether, he did about 1,000 full-size finished paintings. So he would, and we're not counting the murals, because he also did 15 large murals, but for him to put out, 12 to 15 to 20 paintings a year was fairly typical. So 8 and 9 weeks is still pretty fast.
Yeah.
And even that biggest one, Exterminate, there's a lot of artists I think that couldn't do that painting in 9 weeks. That's just a lot of canvas to cover. So, but he could work very, very fast when he needed to.
Can I jump in here? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
A few years ago, the Nelson had an exhibit of his Hollywood portraits.
Yes.
And that was very different from the Year of the Peril. Would you agree?
Although, as Elizabeth was saying, they did have several Year of Peril paintings at that exhibit, but they were off to the side, so you didn't have to see them. They were not part of the main theme.
Okay.
And if you want to see them now, they're at the State Historical Society in Columbia. They usually don't have them all up, but they usually have 1 or 2 of them up, if you want to see those in person.
Did he also have a mural in the Topeka Capitol?
Great question. That actually was one of the other regionalists, John Stuart Curry, who was from Kansas. It's the mural of John Brown with his arms out and the tornado in the background. It's a famous image, but nobody really remembers John Stuart Curry's name. And then the other artist in the regionalist group, the three core ones, was Grant Wood from Iowa with American Gothic, The Farmer, The Pitchfork. Yeah.
Yes.
So those are the three regionalist paintings. But Curry and Wood both died in the 1940s, and Benton lived to 1975. So Tom was kind of left to carry the torch.
Thank you.
Anita.
Is there any comparisons done with the stereotypes that he used and how they evolved, the yellow peril, the brutish German, and so forth? Because or even the African-American soldier, have they done about how those images evolved into that and then have evolved into what we accept now?
A little bit. Let me try and answer that this way. One of the things with like that Negro soldier painting, again, it's exaggerated, it's caricature. I don't think that charge holds up really well for Benton. Some people argue the other way, because he did exaggerate everybody. His white farmers, often he does exaggerated facial features and things. His paintings of Native Americans, he did quite a few of those. The early ones are very generic, but as time goes on, Tom gets much more interested in the details, and he did some paintings that feature Native Americans in the 1950s, and one of them shows some members of the Seneca tribe. And Benton actually went to the reservation in Oklahoma to meet Seneca elders, who he felt had the purest, for lack of a better word, purest Seneca features. He felt the Seneca that were still in upstate New York had intermarried too much with the French Canadians. So he went to Oklahoma to sketch a specific Seneca, and then went to museums to research their clothing, their weapons, things like that. So it wasn't just this generic Native American. As for the German and the Japanese figures in Year of Peril, that's really the only time he ever paints anybody like that. Those were really his only international paintings that off the top of my head I can think of. So it's really kind of a one-off thing.
Well, Steve, before we wrap up, do you want to talk about the exhibit that's at the library right now?
Thank you. That's great. So if you want to learn a little bit more about Benton, the home itself right now is closed for COVID. Our visitor center is open, although don't come today. We had a tree fall down and knocked out the power to the visitor center. Normally you can come see the visitor center. But down at the downtown public library for about another 5 months, there's a fabulous exhibit, 32 black and white photos of Tom Benton at work in his studio, relaxing in his house. Those were taken by a local photographer in 1956. So I highly recommend going down to the downtown public library and seeing those. Almost every art museum in the country has got something by Benton. The Nelson Art Gallery has one of the best publicly viewable collections. State Historical Society, the Kemper Museum of Contemporary Art has one Benton. I think it's currently on exhibit, but the St. Louis Art Museum, the Metropolitan Museum, the Whitney, San Francisco, LA County, his stuff is all over the place. So if you're interested in Benton, again, you may not like him. A lot of people don't. That is certainly fair and understandable. But if you want to learn more about him, please seek his artwork out. So, and we went 2 minutes over, not too bad.
It was perfect. All right, thank you so much. Let's give Stephen a round of applause. Thank you so much for that wonderful program and really interesting discussion afterwards too. Thank you.
And Steve, real quick, is he still, I haven't been to the Truman Library since they've revamped it. Does he still have a mural there?
There's a big mural there, and the Truman Library opened back up to visitors on December 2nd.
Yeah.
So you can now go see that mural, and the new renovation, the new exhibits there are really great. I should have mentioned the Truman Library, but yeah, I can't think of everything. So yeah. All right, I'm gonna go through the chat and see if there's any questions I missed, and I'll just write those up, but then after that, I'll duck out. But thank you very much for having me.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, I have no announcements. I got no emails with any announcements. Does anyone have an announcement they need to make?
I don't know if this is exactly an announcement, but I anticipate that everyone soon will get an email on the whole state membership asking people to opt in or not to having an occasional, infrequent, but important text, and giving specifically the phone number that you would want to have that done on. And in fact, you know, as we were listening to the presentation and how Benton was so needing to get the word out about his opinions and all of that, you know, I think that specifically around redistricting is the thing that is prompting this. So anyway, I hope people will open the email and I hope people will opt in to receiving. And I know that, you know, the state, nobody wants to drive people away by annoying by text. And I know they will only do them during the day, not at night. And I also know that it's very easy always to opt out, if you have opted in, to opt out of getting text. So anyway, that's
okay.
Closest I have to an announcement.
And I did remember, I do actually have one, which is that we are, I have sent out a message in the e-voter that we're doing some fundraising. So please consider giving to the league as part of your end of the year gift giving plans. We have a goal of $2,500, and I have made the first contribution. So I have tossed the seed dollar in the guitar case. So please join me, and it's easy to do on the website. So you can just go to the website and make a donation. So that's my announcement. And then my last announcement is, of course, please join Rachel and me. If you are a member, jump over to this other Zoom that we've got in the chat. I'll put it in the chat one more time. Because, oops, nope, I will put it in the chat to everyone, not to the people who have left, which is what I just accidentally did. Okay, I can't put it in the chat. I'm sorry. You'll have to scroll back, or someone else can put it in the chat. So anyway, we're going to talk a little bit. We want to ask you a few questions about how long you've been in the league, why you're in the league, and we want to record that for our podcast so that we can put it together for our December podcast. Yeah, Laura.
And just a reminder, our last of the year, last monthly new member orientations will be next Friday, the 17th from 5 to 6. After Friday, we're going to go to quarterly new member orientations for next year. That's what we've kind of come up with some of the membership committee input. And you are welcome to join, whether you are a new member or an active member. We have had 60 new members this year, and we anticipate that next year will probably increase as people go, oh yeah, midterms coming up. So we'll see. We do a PowerPoint, which I'll be updating for 2022, and it's kind of fun to see what we show new members and how we give new members a background and talk about our league. And those of you in the book club, we will be discussing our last book of the year this coming Thursday on the 16th. So book club on the 16th, new member orientation on the 17th. And, you know, please, please, please be the emissary for the league, no matter where you are. One of my friends just joined this week because of an event we went to on Tuesday, and she came to that event, and we started talking about what was going on. And there were other league members there who said, oh yeah, I'm a member of the league. So please, please, please always talk about the fact that you are in the League of Women Voters, Kansas City, Jackson Clay Platte, and you'd be surprised how many people go, oh, I've thought about that, or oh, I didn't know that, or oh, I can join that. So we are our own best advertisement.
What book are you discussing at this last meeting, Laura?
We will be discussing, our last book of the year is This Fight is Our Fight by Elizabeth Warren, which I read several years ago in another book group. And my quick summary is that she lays out her childhood as to how it informed her passion in adulthood. At one point, her father had a heart attack. Her mother went back to work as a clerk at, I believe it was a Sears. And if there had not been a minimum wage in force, they would have lost their home. So she is a true middle class, came from a true middle class background. And that totally informs her passion for what she does in public service today.
All right, awesome. Thank you. All right, well, if there is nothing else, no other announcements, I'm going to say happy holidays to all, and I'll see you on the other Zoom, I hope. So Rachel's probably, no, I'll hop off because I have to start it. So I'm going to hop off and I'll let Crystal end the meeting for everybody. And I will see you guys.
It doesn't start until noon, right?
No, I'm going to start it now. So
oh, you are?
It'll be fine. Yep.
Oh,
well, yeah, I don't want you guys to hang.
How long will it probably be?
Oh, you could just answer your questions and hop off. Half hour tops.
Oh,
but okay. But for everybody, half hour tops for everybody.
And Anne, you've got it in the chat, but as soon as we close this, we lose our chat. So are we?
Yeah.
Oh, so everybody can click on it right now. Yeah.
I'm not going to close it, Laura. So I'll wait till you guys all get on.
Yeah, she'll leave it open. So I'll leave and I'll go open that meeting. And so I will see you guys there. Thank you, Crystal, for being on.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Crystal, for being our techno person.
Yeah, definitely.
Really appreciate your involvement and we appreciate you.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. I guess I should probably click on this link too.
Well, I'm trying. Here we go.